Life as an immigrant can make you feel like you're constantly moving. I am reminded of this every time I take the bus back and forth between the city where my parents settled, Noblesville, Indiana, and the sanctuary city of Chicago. The bus, which once felt like a convenient and cheap way to move back and forth between places, is now a necessity, since I can't fly without fear due to the current socio-political climate of the United States. The journey reminds me of my migration from Mexico to what was, to us at least, a foreign and hostile land. I often find myself wondering, if people knew my story, would their viewpoint on immigration change? To be honest, I usually come to the same conclusion that probably not. But here I am, detailing the events that led to my relocation and their lasting effects. 3 years after I left my home, my doggy bed, and Boris, the dog it was modeled after, in Guanajuato, I was home alone with my dad in our Midwestern house when I experienced my first ever tornado warning. I couldn't help but cry at the sound of the blaring alarms. My house was always loud, a good kind of loud, but the alarm managed to cut through the love and light in our home and reverberate in me and my father's chest. My dad spoke very little English at the time and didn't know anything about this horn echoing through the streets. For all he knew, the four horsemen of the apocalypse were here to punish him for the things adults don't like to talk about. He quickly called my aunt, who was a veteran of the immigrant experience, and she told him to just drive me down to her house. On the way to her place, the sky loomed over us. My dad assured me we'd be fine and that the only thing I had to fear was fear itself. That didn't make any sense, but he'd never let me astray, so I tried my hardest to be brave. Right as we were about to exit the neighborhood, a squirrel jumped out in front of our borderline archaic sedan and we came to a screeching halt. I winced. I cradled my head in my arms. When I finally looked up, my dad was staring straight ahead. It was as if the blood had been drained from his face. "I didn't stop in time," he said. I watched as my father absent-mindedly unlocked the car door and got out in the middle of the road. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I was shocked to say the least when my dad picked up his accidental roadkill, carried it to the side of the road, and proceeded to spend 15 minutes using his bare hands to break up the frozen dirt. He picked up the carcass and lowered it into its shallow grave. If he's putting all this effort into it, he might as well cremate the damn thing and wear it in a locket around his neck, I thought. When he entered the car again, I saw something that would plague my mind for years to come. There were tears in his eyes. My father was crying. I, for one, didn't know men could do that. For as long as I could remember, I was taught that tears were something reserved for sensitive little boys, something you grew out of. I asked him why he was crying if men weren't supposed to do that. I need you to know that in this world, the bravest thing a man can do is have compassion upon every living thing. We don't get to decide who's worthy of kindness. I couldn't control that I took that little animal's life, but I can have the decency to give it a proper resting place, he said. I was more scared of my dad than I was of the tornado. 3 years prior, I look at my new, bright blue eyesore of a bed and squeal. It's exactly what I wanted. A twin-sized bed with a Dougie cutout whose ears jut out from the headboard. I can't believe my dad did this with his bare hands. As I admire his carpentry, I begin to think of how amazing he is. I swear, he could probably take God's job if he wanted to. And unlike God, he would never complain or hold it over my head. He keeps the earth rotating on his index finger. He pokes holes in the thin fabric of the firmament to make the stars. He delicately places the sun in the sky as easily as he sets breakfast on the table. I imagine he even picked up a concrete slab of a house and expertly placed it in the shade to protect his family from Mexico's perpetually hellish climate. It would be another year before my father was diagnosed with renal disease. I remember sitting on my mom's lap, tracing the lines in her palm with my stubby finger, taking in the smell of the sterile doctor's office. I tuned out most of what the doctor said. That is, until he pointed at me and said, "You won't even get to see him on his first day of kindergarten if this keeps up." I wasn't worried. My father just needed some medicine and he'd get better, right? I half scanned the crowd at my kindergarten Christmas concert, a formality since he hasn't shown up to a single one of my school events. He always says he'll try his best. I always get my hopes up. It's been 1 year since I saw my father cry, and I know better now. I know my dad, the charity case, isn't God. I know that on account of his severe renal disease, he can't even muster up the energy to change his Rosetta Stone DVDs, one of the many things I have to do for him. After getting home, I make my way to my parents' bedroom. The house is unsettlingly quiet, and it has been for years now. I give my dad a side hug, careful not to squeeze too hard in case he splinters and shatters into thousands of pieces. My dad had been sick for so long, but as I got older, I began to realize how truly weak he was becoming. My mother became the breadwinner while my dad stayed home and tended to his kids. Although I don't think he did a very good job, he often neglected his cleaning duties in favor of laying in bed, clutching his abdomen, and breathing intermittent, shallow breaths, causing me and my sister to pick up the slack. His door was always open, but I rarely dared to step foot in his room in fear that I would turn into some weird, philosophical discussion. Topics on the table included aliens, corrupt government officials, and astral projection, which he claimed he was capable of doing. It was obvious to me that he thought I was stupid. I even considered the possibility that the dead squirrel gave him some brain-eating amoeba that went undetected. I couldn't bear to look at him when he was in this condition anyway. Who was he to give me advice? I loved him, but my father was a weak man. It was as if he was fused to his bed, contained to the four walls of our home. I resented him for being the reason my mom was never home, and when she was too tired to do much of anything. I wish I could have lifted the burden of manual labor off my mother's shoulders, but what was I to do? That was supposed to be my father's job, and he wasn't much use in that department. Everyone knows that the husband goes to work and the wife stays home. It's common knowledge. As I said my nightly prayers, I struggled to find things to be grateful for. My grandmother used to tell me that there's always something to be thankful for because there's always someone who has it worse than you. My grandmother was one of the few things I don't regret leaving behind in Mexico. Her philosophy never made any sense to me, but like always, God is thanked for my glass father, my workaholic mother, and my rigid older sister. It's been 9 years since I saw him cry, and this is the 4th time I'm mourning my father. Ever since I was 12 and my mother informed me that I would have to step up and be the man of the house, I promised myself I would never cry from that point forward. And I had stayed true to my word. I don't want to sound ungrateful. Obviously, I am so grateful to my parents for providing me with all the necessities, but this is just getting excessive. For some reason, every few years, his condition drastically worsens and we all say our goodbyes. Just in case. His condition eventually improves and we go on with our life, but something feels different this time. So when it's my turn to visit him in his incessant deathbed, I make the decision to give him a hug. A real hug. But when I come face to sunken in, malnutrition face with my father, I can't bring myself to do it. The same awkward side hug is exchanged, and he gives me a weak half smile, like always. Seemingly, out of nowhere, his expression shifts. "I'm sorry," he said. "What?" "I'm sorry I never got to know you. The real you, I mean." Tears well up in my eyes and I hug him. Hard. I feel his grown-out stubble rub against my face and it brings me back to Mexico, to him tucking me into my bright blue dog bed and kissing me on the cheek. I squeeze even harder. I feel him shatter and regenerate within a matter of seconds. This whole time I thought I was too preoccupied with pitying my father, thinking of how his illness affected us, that I never realized how far me and my father had drifted. He had become a stranger taking up the space in my home, accepted only because of the misfortune that had befallen him. Although my father's condition improved a few days later, I will carry what happened that day with me for the rest of my life. My grandmother's advice resonates in a way that it didn't previously. I still don't understand why other people's misfortunes should make me feel better about my hardships, but I now understand that I always have something to be grateful for. I understand that pity and love are two completely different things. I know love doesn't feel like an obligation, that it doesn't feel like fear, that it doesn't weigh on your shoulders, slowly compressing your spine, making you half the man you once were. I know to hug hard and love harder, because shutting yourself off in order to be devoid of feeling is exponentially worse than taking life as it comes, with pain, love, joy, and loss.